Good afternoon, everyone. This is Naishad Gadani coming to you from Melbourne, and welcome to 223rd episode of Career Care Package. As we call that, it's the world's longest running LinkedIn Live show, and we bring
We're going
you
to claim
joy.
it.
We
Go
bring
for
you
it.
joy and optimism, especially in the times that we find ourselves in. And we've been doing it since March 2020, and we'd like to continue at least until I retire, probably next year. So we really want to welcome TJ, and she has been on our show previous last year for a few times as well, and it's been absolutely fascinating to catch up. She's an experienced career professional, and we would love to talk to her about nothing else than Cards Against Insanity, because why would not we, right? And today we are going to talk about unlocking the strengths and talents that what we have, but we will do it in an interesting fashion, and we'll use one of these cards that we have. And before we start to talk to TJ, we'll welcome Caroline Brown.
Thanks, Nation. It's absolutely fantastic to be here, and who knows how long we'll continue this for. But Nation, I've had such a ride, met so many amazing people like TJ. I think we've had you on our show 3 or 4 times now. It's absolutely wonderful to welcome you back and
Thank
talk
you.
about storytelling. Yeah, thanks for joining us.
Thank you very much. Yeah, no, I'm very excited to talk about this. And I just have to say, these are amazing. If you haven't got your copy already, grab some because they just get your grey matter going. And I'm really excited to talk about storytelling in this context today. So thank you for creating these cards. They're amazing.
Thank you so much. And yeah, I mean, we're talking about this before the broadcast about how job search isn't fun, but there is a lot of things that you can do to make it more fun. And ironically, when you're having more fun, you're more engaging, you're more confident, and that kind of thing. So I guess just a good place to start was maybe just reintroduce yourself to our audience, to people that don't know who you are and what you actually do.
Yeah, sure. So my name is Tee-Jay Ramnarain-Little. I head up the talent promotion team at LHH in Australia and also support the team in our APAC region. And I also help people in a coaching capacity as well, sort of performance coaching. I love working with people. I just think people are fascinating. Everyone's different, and I love that uniqueness of individuals. I feel so privileged to work with the incredible professionals that I do in my corporate world, and just across all the things that I get up to. The professionals that come through career transition, for example, are just their skill sets are incredible, and they all do have amazing stories. So it's once you get into those stories that you start to learn about those nuances of all the individuals, the sorts of things that they've done, in their lives, but also in their careers, and that's what makes it very exciting. So for me, I think people are amazing, and I love to remind them of that. And I think some people do forget. So that's one of the things I love to do, is remind people they're great.
That's fantastic, because I think it is a time where people do need to be reminded that they're great. And I guess the storytelling card, we talk about stories and how powerful they are, but how do you see storytelling as part of, how does it inform a job search or inform a brand?
Yeah, look, there are so many things. Like, I was doing some prep on this, thinking about like what is it that kind of brings it to life. And I mean, I think the thing about all of us is we've been on a journey. So no matter where we're at in our career, even if you're a graduate and you're just starting out, you've got a journey already because you've had a life. So like, life informs our journey. Your education informs your journey. The people that you've hung out with, and the perhaps job experiences, etc., that you've had. So it provides that timeline and journey no matter where you're at in your career. Of course, if you're further along your career, you've had more experiences, you've perhaps worked in other countries, different industries, perhaps had different careers even. So all of those things inform the journey. So I think the storytelling, it provides context. It talks a little bit about certainly who you are as a person. A lot of the conversations I have these days with employers are definitely talking about who we are as people. And I think COVID has really brought this to the fore as well. And I think storytelling is all about that too. I think it also shows the sort of choices that you've made throughout your career as well. Those are stories in themselves, and those transitions are stories. So I think, again, that's really important. I think the other thing about job search as well is when people are planning their next move, I think when you understand where you've been, it helps you know where you want to go. And one of the things I often see, particularly with career transition, is just because you've been in a particular career or role doesn't mean that's what's also next for you. So I think,
Mm.
being able to tell those stories, but talk about sort of what's important to you, that comes from that as well. But it also helps with the planning. It helps you articulate the tasks that you've done, which can be a little bit boring just as a
Mm.
sort of, this is what I've done. But when you encapsulate it in a story and a context, that makes a lot of difference. And those interesting things that you've been up to, definitely sort of shows your life experience. I think that's really important. And of course, it's really useful to use in interviews, to use in the sort of artifacts of your job search. So your LinkedIn profiles, your conversations with people, when you're networking, stories are so important because people gravitate towards that versus just kind of, lists of things. So, all of
Mm.
those things I think help with the job search process.
Yeah, it's funny when we were talking about, like what people tend to do when they're looking for a job is look at what their job description was previously.
Yeah.
And that job description might have been through HR, it might have been through recruitment, it might have been through your boss, but it's not you. And it's
Mm,
not what you bring to the table. And I think,
yeah.
there's a real difference between somebody that's just done that versus gone through that storytelling approach. So how do you use that to tease out the stories that people should share, or the defining stories? Because we all have stories from all works of our lives, but what's the
Yeah.
approach to actually tease out the stories that you use?
Look, I think that again, it depends what you're gunning for. Like what do you want to cause, in the conversation that you're having? So if you want to demonstrate particular skill sets and things like that, then that's one way. I'm just going to apologize straight away. I know we're on a live and there's, I'm in lockdown here, so there's other conversations happening in the background. So I
That's all
apologize for that. Then
right.
you won't hear it. But yeah, no. So I think it depends what you want to cause. So if you're having a conversation about and to demonstrate specific skills and competency, then I think it's understanding, well, what competencies do I need to demonstrate here, and where has that happened in my career, but then contextualize it. And that's really where the storytelling comes in. So I think that's one way of doing it. I think the other thing is it helps you understand confidently what you bring to the table. So one of the things we look at, I guess, in sort of transition is, where have you used these skills, and like, think about those skills, but again, as I'm saying, in context, bring that to life. We're going to talk a little bit, I know, about structure and how we bring those to life in various different ways. There are many different structures that you can use, and we'll talk about that in a moment. But, think about the industry that you want to go into. If you haven't worked in a particular industry, I've worked with people, for example, who might have worked in one industry predominantly for their career. How else have you interacted with the industry that you might want to go into? If you've worked in finance, you want to go into sport, for example, how can you demonstrate your interest in sport? What stories can you tell that would show your passion for that industry, but also demonstrate your competency based on what you've done? So there's lots of different ways you can use stories to bring those to life. And I think that's the thing. It's about connecting with us. We're all human beings. We all love stories. We've been hearing them and telling them since we were kids. It's a way that we love to share information. And it just, as I say, it kind of gets us excited about things.
Mm. And it's interesting. I know Dinesh's probably got a question. I'll stop butting in with questions. What I've found with clients is if you get them to put their stories out on the table, they start to reflect on the entirety of their career, but also the entirety of their life as well. And just that reminder of, oh, I've done this in that context, and I've done this in that context, and I've done this, and I've applied the same sorts of skills. Or, it's a real confidence boost to be able to, when you're looking for a job, often it's like your position's been made redundant or you've left, and it's not a great psychological place to be in to start, where you need to start projecting confidence. But if you can take stock and reflect on, what you've done over different aspects of your life, it's a real confidence boost as well.
Yeah, totally agree.
If you can reflect on the where this kind of relates to the cards against insanity. So what we have done in this one is that we actually ask people to write 10 accomplishment stories. And we are not saying accomplishment story that's just related to your career. It could be just that you organized a fat Indian wedding which has 5,000 people to attend. I think that's a massive project management task, right? So you can also talk about the accomplishment which are personal, as well as professional. But when you start to look at them, you'll see some trends emerging and some themes emerging. And I think that's what I'm always interested in, the themes emerging, because you're the same person. If you go to work or if you're in life, you're the same person. You don't just suddenly switch on and switch off a different personality, unless you've got obviously personality disorder. Then you probably someone else. But I think that's very important. And that's what we are asking through these cards, is write accomplishment stories, something that you are really, really proud of. So that's a real clear cut activity, and then you can reflect on that. And secondly, when I was studying my career education course, we had an activity that we did, was that on one axis you kind of put in sorry, on one axis you put in the time, and then you kind of put in kind of things that happen good above the line, things that happen bad or worse below the line, and you kind of draw that. And that itself exercise was enough for me to understand the coaster that I went through. I came back to Australia, then I got redundant, then I moved back here. And so I think that also itself is kind of a very visual story to me, that I've done that previously. And I think that's very profound to understand in the context of when you're looking at job, you're continuously under this constant pressure and constant criticism of yourself by yourself, where you're not able to see anything outside of it. So that these are some of the things that I think when I reflected on it, it just gave me. And one thing that I always do when I find myself pretty low, I always go back and check out my LinkedIn recommendations, and I feel there are at least 120 people who say I'm awesome. And I think that that's a really great boost. And I'm looking at things which are saying, what, yep, this is the theme, this is what I'm really great at, and I can kind of rebound, regenerate myself on that. So just we got a Dr. Sundar say Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde personality. I don't know. Sometimes we find ourselves having two different persona. Yeah, that's right. I think I was speaking to TJ before. I've got a dad voice and Naishad voice, which are two distinct voices as well. But yeah, so that's how I do that. Any other kind of structural idea that you have, TJ, on how do we craft this?
Look, I think again, it depends where you're using them. So, I mean, interviews, you definitely want to be using the things, you mentioned in the card about the CAR formula. So, talking about challenge, action, result. There are others. So, you've got the STAR formula, which is situation, task, action, result. And then you've got the SOAR story structure, which is situations, obstacles, action, results. So, essentially, you're looking to articulate very succinctly a story and relay it. And I think if you're going to use that structure in an interview, it gives you a really great way to sort of rehearse it, almost kind of walk it through. I have to say though, I think in any situation where you're telling a story, I mean, definitely have rehearsed these things and thought them through. But I think the thing about using any stories, or in certainly in interviews, is just be yourself, like be authentic, be passionate about what you've done, certainly be present to what you've done. I love what you said there, actually, Naish, about recommendations. I think those are stories about how you've helped people relay that story back to you, and they are so powerful. I remember when LinkedIn first started and people were a bit skeptical about whether they're real or not. And it's like, oh, you're just asking people, your mates, to do them for you, sort of thing. But I think, when people do take the time to do that for you, it really is an endorsement and something to be, to be asking people for if you genuinely have made a difference. Because as you say, if nothing else, it's a good boost for you in any point in your career. But I think the other thing is, if you're using them on resumes and so on, and obviously everything has to be in context. Wherever you're using these, whether it's on LinkedIn, etc. Again, recommendations are great. I think also do that for other people. Reciprocity is a great thing, so be providing those to others as well. But again, just be genuine, and use those structures to support you, but don't feel like you kind of have to be word perfect with your stories. I think at the end of the day, know what you achieved, and have lots of them in your back pocket. Like I think the thing about stories, and I guess about these accomplishments, is you're quite right. In our personal lives, there are things that we do that are actually very similar to things that we do at work, but we perhaps haven't thought about the link of the two and the actual skill sets and sort of transferable skills that we have. And I think, again, one of the wonderful things that I've seen happening in sort of this COVID scenario, because we are all virtual, things have changed a little bit, and we're definitely more present to it. Was Are You OK Day yesterday, how each other is doing, what we're about on a more personal level, really understanding, because we're in each other's homes every day. It's a very different reality that we're now living in. And I think all of those things have just made us perhaps a little bit more accessible. And, the stories, I think, the way in which we tell them can be as well.
I think, yeah, they definitely make you more human. And I was just reflecting, I was just doing an interview coaching session with a client who's absolute overachiever, but her perception of herself is like so low. And so we were going through some examples using the storytelling approach of like using the STAR approach around leadership and resilience and where she felt she'd failed and that kind of thing. And the act of actually reflecting on the actions that she took in those stories was a real reinforcement of actually, I was making it, these things just didn't happen to me. I was making a decision and I was demonstrating, these particular leadership type qualities as well. So, it's that confidence reinforcement, but also, we're talking about stories from all aspects of her life as well. So to bring into that interview, because, obviously the interviewers want to see her as the person, or the whole person that they want to hire as well. So want to ask you a question, Tee-Jay, about some of those questions that you might use with clients that really, like, great questions that help them tease out their story, that, you might use with your clients, or just might help people when they start to do that process themselves.
Yeah, 100%. I think, at the end of the day, the stories are about us. So for me, it has to start with us as an individual. So for me, it's, one of the things we talked about sort of was around, I guess, strengths and sort of, what are the sort of hidden strengths that we have that make us, that create those stories, really. One of the things I would say first of all as well is that, it's such a shame when you hear, we all have our moments, but when people forget how amazing they are, and as I said at the beginning of this, segment, I'm such a stand for people to remember. One of the things that I definitely use, I'm a profiler, so I use lots of different profiling tools, and one of them is definitely the sort of Clifton strengths. I think when you know what you bring to the table, it makes life so much easier. And I think, again, those types of structures, if you know your top 5, I call it the hot knife through butter moment, because you get to, you get to look at those top strengths and kind of go, okay, if that's my top strength, mine, for example, is adaptability. Where have I demonstrated that? Where in my life, where in my career, where in that particular role or that particular project did I demonstrate that particular strength? Because there's no doubt when you know those things, it literally is like hot knife through butter. Like you just kind of go, I keep seeing that show up and I keep seeing it show up. And it's something that you then become known for. It's something that you can do without even thinking. And it's you get to work with other people who also do that. And if you can demonstrate that and start to really own it, for me, those are the kind of tactics I'd probably use, less necessarily about the questions, but more about, like, if people do already know their strengths, how are you, where does that show up for you? When did you really when can you see for yourself that you really use that? And what was the outcome? Because genuinely people create those results very easily and quickly when they are using their strengths. So for me, it really is about kind of, using, resources and tools to get there. Because, you can get that feedback definitely from recommendations. As you just said, Naish, if you look at your recommendations and you start to see the language used about you and the sorts of things that you're delivering and the service and kind of value that you're bringing, employers these days absolutely want to know, what is the value? How are you going to do something differently to someone else? You might have 2 candidates potentially who on paper look relatively similar, but it's really about who they be and what they bring to the table and that value that they can demonstrate and articulate. And that is definitely through stories in that way. So that's how I would describe it, Carolyn.
I love what you said about, like, the knife through butter, right? And because it's kind of that process of working with people and, teasing out their stories or starting from their strengths. In your own language, you've described a very, we can instantly see, like, knife through butter, and that kind of description only comes from that level of self-awareness, self-reflection, understanding who you are through that process of understanding, you know, somewhat like what your stories are. And that's the kind of language that comes out when you do go through this kind of process in whatever form it takes, is you come up with a really clear, insightful, precise way of describing something, and it's unique to the way that you see the world and do things. So it's a, you know, great example of like a mini story type thing in the way that you've described it.
It's funny, actually. I remember one of my colleagues said it many years ago when I was working back in Sydney, and I was like, oh, that, because for me, I think that's the thing about stories. They evoke emotion. They make you feel something. And I remember hearing that, and it wasn't in relation to strengths, but for me, once I knew mine, I was like, here's my hot knife through butter moment. Like, I get it now. Like, I know what I bring, and I can see where it shows up. And I think that's the thing. And then, of course, the benefit of working in a team is you look for, you know, you understand other people's strengths, and then you get them, you know, having their moment, and how they do things really seamlessly and easily, and then you can support each other in a really productive way, and be really efficient. So yeah.
Fantastic.
I previously used Strength Finder test for myself when I was transitioning, and it identified 5 signature strengths, as you know, Gallup Strength Finder does, and I've used that as part of my cover letters. So I would you know, genuinely or authentically say that this is what you know, the Strength Finder test said about myself, and communication, you know, empathy, adaptability. There are you know, and then I give them an evidence of that. I think that's really profoundly, and I can actually see myself in those 5 strengths. So I think that's another way of communicating it. And I'll put in the link. You know, there's also another strength test that people can do, which is called VIA strength survey as well, which we have also included as part of our you know, cards as well in one of them. Another formula that I've used, I found it when I went for a weight loss program, and they gave a formula, not formula, but they shared us a video called Hero's Journey, and which talk. So there's a book called Hero's Journey, and you can watch a small YouTube clip, but effectively there's an author who have really looked at all the heroes, whether that's mythological heroes to Marvel, Avengers, everyone else, and he's kind of come to a conclusion. This is the graph of a superhero's journey. It's like 5 6 basic points, right? And I find that always interesting to use that in terms of interviews context. That I'm telling a story because the story is about removing an obstacle or overcoming an obstacle, and how I did that, like a superhero would do. That superhero going about his or her life, found a superpower, and they started to help people. But suddenly they came across something which is beyond powerful than them, and they had to dig deeper in their soul, in their, you know, in their strengths, to find something which is another amazing level. And then they defeated it. And but the important thing is they came back to the same state again, and now they are going to look for the new challenge. Interviews in the context of interview is similar. You are going about your day-to-day life and suddenly come across with something really powerful than you, and you have to dig deeper. What can I do with it and overcome that? And then you summarize it and say, next day new challenge begin. So I think that's another way to look at, you know, storytelling. And lastly, I would usually start with, I, w- I usually try to grab people, you know, in specifically in the interview context. You know what happened, and I start with, you know, I was working at this company, and I was about to leave my office, and this happened suddenly. I'm just in 2 sentences, you're visualizing that I'm rushing back to go to, you know, work, to home, and suddenly I'm being given a task to do, and then what did I do? So I think that, you know, so I think it also to do more with the language. And another thing to find, you know, add is the genuineness of it. You can't fabricate a story. You can't suddenly, you know, tell something that you've not experienced, and tell with that genuine and authentic voice as well. So that's what I would say.
Why do you think people are afraid to tell their stories? Because I often find, you know, like, say, for example, doing some interview coaching, and the first story you get is like, no, there's a better story in there. Do you often find that with people, with clients, Tee-Jay, that getting them, like, that they have a hesitation about telling the real story?
Look, I think, imposter syndrome is on the card, and I'm gonna sort of highlight it. It's unfortunately, a lot of people, for whatever reason, like many different things happen in life, and as you said, Naish, it's a bit of a roller coaster. Life is like that, and I think depending on where you're on, if you're on an up or a down, that can influence who you be about your own story and your own stories. And I think a lot of people, we're in a really weird world right now, where if you're not kind of almost out on social media and sort of active, then you're kind of invisible. And I do talk a bit about this myself. And in fact, one of the stories I wanted to share with you guys is, last year for myself, I was active on LinkedIn, and at the same time I was having conversations with people. And my challenge, I'll use the car structure, was that I was telling people kind of, this is what you need to do, but I wasn't really doing it myself. And I'm very much about, like, don't tell people what to do if you're not willing to walk the talk. And I thought, I need to take some action here, because actually I'm not doing it. So like you guys, you got into action in March last year. So did I. It was a catalyst for me. And I was like, I need to start writing articles. I need to be posting more frequently. I really need to walk the talk here, because it's just not okay with me to not do that. So as did exactly that, started putting articles together. I'd have conversations with people, things would come up, and it's all of these sorts of conversations, and I'd write an article based on that, and be posting about it and looking for articles to share from other people, and really just bringing that information to the fore and building the muscle so that I was out there. But I think a lot of people are very uncomfortable still with having a presence on social media, because we've been naturally told, I guess, over many, many years, really not to show up that much. And honestly, the older I get, the more I think it's a disservice to ourselves, but also to everyone else, because we're all unique. And if we're not being ourselves and actually showing up, then we're ripping everyone off, because we're not contributing. And everyone has a unique voice, and it's so powerful when people express themselves and share and support and provide something that delivers service. So I think that's one of the reasons, Carolyn. I think people are a little bit scared to sort of, as they see it, self-promote. But Marianne Williamson has a great quote, and I can't tell you off the top of my head, but it really is about that thing of, like, we all have our light, and really we need to shine it, and we're more scared of our light than we are of our darkness, really. So get it out there, because actually, again, we're missing out. There are so many wonderful voices throughout the ages that if they hadn't shown up, we wouldn't have their amazing wisdom. And, that's what life's all about. And I think a lot of people don't think they've got anything really of value to share. And again, that's like heartbreaking, when you think of the things that people have done in their careers and their lives. And, I think one of the things that I've loved seeing, on LinkedIn in COVID, is that people are sharing a little bit more personal things and actually revealing a bit more about themselves inside of the type of posting that they're putting out there. And again, we're beings in a business environment. So of course, if you can contextualize it into a business sense, great, because that's the business story. And, what's important is showing up and really just truly being yourself. I know not everyone's an extrovert, and that's okay too. But everyone does have value. And I think for me, it's about, if you can show your value, it would be awful for someone not to get a role when they're absolutely the right candidate, but because they're not comfortable sharing their capability. Again, that's where I see our role as coaches and supporters, to really ensure that people get where they're going, and to help them, tease out those stories. And I'm sure, I know you do that on a daily basis as well. It's like helping people see how amazing they are.
And it's funny, like, I guess, you're talking about on LinkedIn about sharing more of the personal. I think without the personal in there, you become just like everybody else, with the kind of like how to and instructional, and this is what I think versus this is why I think that, and that sort of storytelling really connects with people. So for you, in terms of building up your storytelling muscle, what worked? Was it just baby steps, or
Definitely,
giant leap, or?
Well, look, I mean, I, like everyone else who's ever written an article on LinkedIn, had that trepidation of, does it read well? Have I used the right images? Like, I had all of that going on. And at the end of the day, I was just like, I just got to press publish, because at the end of the day, I'm going to put it out there. You know what really helped me though? And I think, again, it's why am I doing it? And actually I was in a seminar yesterday, Are You Okay Day? And it was really about change, and change, knowing why you're going to change. And my why was, it has no integrity for me not to. Like, if I don't post this, and I think the first one I posted was, if you're looking for a needle if job searching for you feels like looking for a needle in a haystack, become the magnet. Because I'd had so many conversations with people, and I mean, I've got quite an out there sense of humor at times as well. So I use like a Lego guy with his kind of like, Lego thing. And I actually found it quite a fun thing to write, because I was just like, you know what? This is so important, but it doesn't have to be significant. It doesn't have to be serious. It's, look, at the end of the day, get out there. Like, the best way to really kind of pull people towards you is let them know what you're up to, because job search can be a tough journey. And if you are not going to show up, and I talk about it as being the invisible man without the bandages on, no one knows you're in the room. And that's just not okay, because you've got all this amazing stuff to share. So in some way, shape or form, you've got to get out there. So for me, it was literally ripping the Band-Aid off, going, you know what, I've got to post this, but also being really clear about the reason why I wrote that particular article was because it was in response to conversations I'd had. And I really was already having those conversations anyway, but it was like, how do I, one, be more efficient, because time was becoming like, there was a lot of people needing time, but also provide that information in a way that people can digest it at their leisure and get value from it. So there were a number of different things. And then, over time, like you guys, it becomes easier because you get really clear about the why. Like, why do I do it? Because I want to provide that information in a way that people can digest it. I want them to have access to it, and I really want them to get where they're going, like whatever that is on their journey. If they're in a creative environment, I want them to do that. If they want to be, in a technical or digital environment, then that. Whatever it is that, is your next career step, or whatever you want in your, next on your path, that's where I want to help you get to. And all of the articles I've written have been about that. I also think stories also help with personal branding. I was very lucky. One of the things I invested in, I think it was either earlier this year or last year, was a personal branding course with Carly Lyon, who's amazing. And she talks about this all the time. That sort of personal branding is like, share your stories, because people connect to those, and that's exactly what this is about. It's about human connection, and if COVID has taught us anything, it's that we crave that. So this is something that really provides that connection and availability. It makes us very available to other people, but it's not really about shameless self-promotion. It's just about being out there and being seen and being of service. One of the things I think I got for myself last year is I can't keep hiding and expect to be of service to people, because this just doesn't work. So I think, it's like insanity. Like, I've got to stop doing that. And actually, cards against insanity. I'm glad you created these, because it's like, that was part of my insanity. It was like, I keep doing it this way and hoping that I'll get a different result. But, if you don't get out there, you don't. So that was my learning.
And it's funny because, like, the process of sharing stuff, I remember I started blogging back in 2010, and the process of, I've rarely had a negative comment. Like, for the thousands of bits of content that I put out there in the universe and whatever, I've rarely had a negative comment. And when I have, it's just kind of like, oh, well, next, type thing. So I think that's one thing that people, particularly women, do get trolled quite badly sometimes. And but my experience has been the opposite of that, to be honest. I'm not saying, like, it's tremendously traumatic to be trolled and things like that, but there are stories of where that actually hasn't happened, and that's been certainly the case for me. So I think that holds.
Yeah. Sorry, Karen. I remember back in my early career, another business that we had, and I did have an experience of that, and I remember crawling. I was actually very early in my mum career, so my daughter was very young, and I remember kind of crawling back into my shell and thinking, oh my God, this is scary. But actually, I look back now and think, gosh, if I was the me I am now, I would have gone, well, I really appreciate you sharing that, and actually, you know what, I'm just on my journey too, and you're right. I don't have that many followers yet, but you know what? I'm just going to put this out there and we'll see what
Mm.
happens. Whereas back then it was
Yeah.
like, oh, so
I've got a
there.
funny
I know
story
how
about
it
the
feels.
first blog post that I ever wrote, which was around, I think it's around behavioural interviews. And I'd done on my posters a find and replace. And I thought I was trying to, of these particular words, I thought I was being really efficient. And then I put the blog post up and I had these double words everywhere. And then I got a comment on the blog. I'm like, cool, I've just had this post up like for 10 minutes and people are commenting. And of course it was to point out the mistakes. And then somebody else jumped in and they were racing themselves throughout my blog to find the double words. And I said, I thanked them for it. And then at the end, I'm like, okay, guys, I'm going to take this down now and fix it up. But, you know, it was a little bit of a baptism of fire, but it wasn't, you know, I just thought it was an amusing story about, you know, just cop it on the chin a little bit. But, yeah.
And I think, one of the things that I would also like to point out is, in the absence of not telling, that the default story continues to run as well for, for people. And I should also have, because not many people are, consider themselves that they've got things to talk about, or think their story is worthy enough to talk about as well. And specifically for those people who consider themselves introvert or shy and they don't want to talk, I think we should also, kind of, I don't know, find a way for them to express as well, because not necessarily everyone knows what to do. I think there is no dearth of knowledge. A lot of my clients, when I tell them, they've got fantastic things to talk about within their own vocation, but they just feel that it's not, I don't know how, I feel just too shy to talk about it. I don't have enough bigger network to tell my story with. And so I think there are people do come up with it. And what I want to tell is to take smaller actions. Don't worry about, if you don't have the big size network, you can continue to build on that, build that network, but continue to tell people about the stuff that matters to you, about the stuff that you care about. Not necessarily, if you are, I don't know, if you are a warehouse manager, and you talk about, and I can't talk about robots and warehouse every day, right? Because that just get too boring. Talk about something which you find more interesting, curious about, fascinating. Talk about that too. Not necessarily just talk about warehouse stuff, because otherwise people will get just too boring stuff on there, right? So I think, you know so I think there are various flavors to it, not just one flavor. Give them chocolate, vanilla, different flavors to it. And that's what, when I started to did the doodling last year, where I did my first doodle on Are You Okay Day. That was my first one. And I thought that that's another way for me to communicate things that matters to me. Now, most of the doodles that I do are copied, and I give credit to the person. They're not original thinking. But the more that I do that, the more original ideas that I come up with. Oh, maybe I can swap this around and do that. But those things are now part of my story, that I want to nudge people in different ways and help them to think differently about stuff,
Yeah.
and bring some a little bit joy and little bit optimism or hope in this, sort of stupid times that we find ourselves in. So I think there are just not one way, there are various ways to share the story.
Yeah, absolutely. One of the things that I and sort of liken it to is building muscles. We've all had to start somewhere, and I mean we're all still learning, because the technology is evolving and we're evolving with it. And at the same time, there's still so much that I don't know personally, and constantly learning. I think you do take it at your own pace, and at the same time, I mean, yeah, you're right, Nate. I think a lot of people don't recognize, I guess, almost how much value that they bring, and some of the things that they see is, I guess, just kind of it because it's so internalized and it's just their stuff, how much value that could add to other people. So yeah, but you kind of have to start somewhere. So it is literally like going to the gym and building muscles. If you kind of get out there and start doing it, it's amazing how that experience kind of gives you momentum, and action cures, I guess, a lot of things. So getting out there and doing it makes a big difference.
I think it's one of the reasons I actually quite like the car and the star approach when you're kind of telling that story. It's like, because the result part is what happened, but it's also the impact you had. So it's always a nice reminder of, that you have had that value that you've contributed, with whatever actions that you've taken. How are you seeing people use stories on resumes or LinkedIn profiles? Have you seen that evolve over the past few years?
Look, definitely on LinkedIn, and I think that's also because it's a multimedia platform now. So people are using that in things like articles, so telling stories there, telling stories in their posts, definitely telling them in video format as well. Yeah, so and even things now, like the multi-tile sort of approach that you can have as well, which is almost like a storyboard actually. So many different ways to do it. I mean, we tell a story almost. There's the audio button that you can have and tell a little bit about yourself. You can do the video in your image. So there's many different ways I think that you can take telling to another level on LinkedIn particularly. Resume is a little bit different. I mean, your story is really probably your kind of profile or a summary about you. I think the resume tells the story. What I think happens though is when you're in interview, you bring those stories to life. So I think that's the opportunity with a resume. Because in some ways the resume is sort of like the flat document, whereas the interview and the conversation is where it brings it all to life and it kind of goes into 3D and color. So that's the opportunity there. But LinkedIn, massive amounts of opportunity to really bring stories to life in about all sorts of things that you're up to. Yeah.
Excellent. We don't have any more questions. I've put the strength test over there. Please go ahead and do the strength test. And if you're interested, there's also another. Just send me a message, and I'll direct you to for a few other tests that you could do as well. But
Yeah.
before we close, please make sure that you go and check out the card link that I've put in, and you can also own card box as well. Cards Against Insanity. We still have got a few more cards in stock before we go out to the manufacturer and get few more. But please go ahead and get your copy, and we'll ship it out to you straight away. Tee-Jay, thank you very much for coming along and sharing your story, and also very
Pleasure.
kind of different ways to approach storytelling in our career as well. So thank you again, and wish you all the best
Pleasure.
in your journey.
Thank you. And thank you both so much for these. They are amazing. I'm really enjoying it. Just kind of gets the grey matter going. And I think, job search as much as anything else is about having fun. And these definitely, they're just fun personified. So just like grab the pack.
Thanks, Tee-Jay. It's been absolutely
Pleasure.
fantastic having you on. If you're watching this on YouTube and you like what you see, please subscribe. If you're watching it on LinkedIn, please follow the hashtag Cards Against Insanity and Career Care Package. And we will join you next week at 12 o'clock to talk on another card. If you've got the cards and you've got a question, please come on and ask, or send me a message beforehand, and we'll answer the question on the show as well, because we really do want to make this totally interactive.
Excellent. So next week we will see you. Until that, please make sure that you mask up, go and get jabbed if you are eligible for that. And we will see you next Friday at 12 p.m., where I think we are going to talk to Anita about one of the cards, from the card deck as well. So have a safe weekend, and we will see you soon. Bye, everyone.
Bye, everyone.